I signed the bridge loan for our Highland Park estate, thinking we were building a future. But 24 hours after the housewarming, he changed the locks. My husband played the millionaire while I quietly funded the lifestyle he flaunted. Watching him kiss another woman in the wine room we built, I noticed the ring on her finger was engraved with my maiden name. I finally understood that this was never a marriage. It was a long con. My name is Calla Mercer. I am 36 years old, and I am a senior credit underwriter at Halloway Private Ledger Bank. I make my living finding the cracks in other people's financial foundations, the little white lies buried in tax returns and the silent debts hidden in shell companies. I read the fine print because that is where the truth lives. But standing on the limestone porch of number 42 Claridge Lane, I realized I had committed the cardinal sin of my profession. I had failed to underwrite my own marriage. The house was supposed to be our masterpiece, a Georgian revival in Highland Park, Dallas, with manicured boxwoods and a price tag that required a down payment of $450,000. Wade called it our dream home. I called it a leverage play. He liked to tell people at the country club that he was a self-made millionaire, but the liquidity that secured the deed came from bridge loans I had personally pushed through compliance using my employee exceptions. We had hosted the housewarming party exactly 48 hours ago. The scent of fresh lilies and expensive cologne still lingered in the foyer, or so I imagined. I had come home early from a compliance seminar in Austin, expecting to surprise him. Instead, the surprise was waiting for me on the welcome mat. 6 cardboard boxes, not moving crates, just cheap liquor store boxes sealed with hasty packing tape. My name was scrawled on the side in Sharpie. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Wade Halston stood there, wearing the cashmere sweater I had bought him for his birthday. He did not look guilty. He looked like he was reading a contract. "You have 24 hours to collect the rest of your personal effects from the garage," Wade said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I changed the locks an hour ago. For safety purposes." "Safety?" I asked, my grip tightening on my carry-on bag. "Wade, I pay the mortgage on this house. My name is on the deed. Your name is on the financing," he corrected, leaning against the doorframe with a terrifying casualness. "But check the occupancy clause we signed for the trust. You really should read more carefully." Calla, before I could process the legal gibberish he was spewing, movement behind him caught my eye. A woman stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. Brielle Knox. She was a lifestyle consultant Wade had hired to decorate the study. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized because it was missing from my suitcase, and in her hand was a crystal flute of the vintage champagne I had stocked for the party. "It's a little early for a visit, isn't it?" Brielle asked, sipping the wine. She smiled, a soft, predatory curvature of the lips that made my stomach turn over. "You're evicting me." I looked from her back to Wade, in front of... "Keep your voice down," Wade snapped, stepping forward to block my view of the interior. "This is exactly why I had to do this. You're unstable, Calla. The stress of the bank, the loans. It's making you paranoid. If you cause a scene on the lawn, I will have to call the police and file a restraining order. Do you know what a domestic disturbance record does to a senior underwriter's license? He knew exactly where to hit. He was weaponizing my career against me." "Go to a hotel," he said. "We'll send the lawyers." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet. Affluent street. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from a sudden, violent clarity. I pulled out my phone and tapped the icon for the smart home security system. Access revoked. The red banner flashed across the screen. He had locked me out of the cameras, the thermostat, the locks. But Wade was arrogant. He understood leverage, but he did not understand data retention policies. I switched to my backup email account, the one linked to the cloud storage for the security hub. The live feed was gone, but the motion-triggered archive was still syncing. I scrolled back 3 weeks. There was a thumbnail dated 21 days ago. I pressed play. The grain of the night vision camera was sharp. It showed the wine room. Wade was there, pouring a glass of red. Brielle walked into the frame. She wasn't a consultant then. She was a co-conspirator. They kissed, long and deep, right in front of the lens. Then, Brielle pulled back. She looked directly up at the camera, her eyes glinting in the infrared light. She raised her glass in a mock toast to the invisible lens, to the wife she knew would eventually see this. It wasn't just an affair. It was a taunt. The screen went black as the file ended. I stood there on the driveway of the house I had paid for, next to the boxes of clothes that represented my entire life. I did not cry. Tears were for people who had lost. I had not lost. I had just been given a new data set. I looked at the closed door. "Okay," I whispered, the sound barely audible over the hum of the neighborhood sprinklers. "Then I'll audit you." I sat in the sterile light of a generic hotel room on the outskirts of the city, treating the boxes Wade had thrown onto the porch like evidence in a forensic audit. My marriage had not been a partnership. It had been a long-term Ponzi scheme where I provided the capital and Wade provided the illusion of returns. He used to tell me that he handled the image while I handled the mechanics, making it sound like we were a power couple. In reality, he was just the front man for a shell company designed to drain me dry. I picked up a stack of papers from the bottom of the box labeled Office Misc. Wade had been sloppy. Or perhaps he just didn't care anymore because he thought he had already won. Crumpled at the bottom was a bank envelope that had been ripped in half. I smoothed it out on the hotel bedspread. The addressee was Brielle Knox, but the mailing address was a post office box in Uptown that I recognized immediately. I paid the quarterly rental fee for that box. Wade had listed it as a business expense for secure correspondence regarding the Halston Family Trust. A cold realization washed over me. 3 months ago, Wade had asked me to review a fee structure for a boutique firm called Juniper Vale Advisory. He claimed they were helping manage his mother's assets. I had approved the vendor setup without a second thought because I trusted him. Now, looking at the torn envelope, I realized Juniper Vale was not a firm. It was a funnel. I opened my laptop and logged into our personal banking portal. I did not touch the bank's internal customer data, as that would trigger an immediate compliance flag. But I had every right to scour my own joint accounts. I filtered the transaction history for the last 6 months. The pattern was so obvious that it was insulting. Every second Tuesday, there was a transfer, $9,500, $9,800, $9,200. "You smart son of a bitch," I whispered to the empty room. He kept every single transfer just under the $10,000 threshold to avoid triggering a currency transaction report or alerting the anti-money laundering algorithms I helped design. He was siphoning liquidity out of our home equity line of credit and sending it straight to the entities controlled by Brielle, and he was using my own regulatory knowledge to do it. I needed to talk to Miles. My brother was a structural engineer who understood load-bearing walls but had a blind spot the size of Texas when it came to the people he loved. I dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I grabbed my keys and drove to his apartment complex in Deep Ellum. It was past midnight, and the building was dark. When I got to his unit, the windows were black. I checked his mailbox in the lobby. It was jammed full of envelopes, the kind with red urgent stamps that screamed final notice. Miles was meticulous. He never missed a bill. I went up to his door and knocked hard. Silence. I knocked again. The door to the adjacent apartment opened, and an elderly woman peered out, clutching a robe tight around her neck. "He isn't there." "Honey," she said, her voice thin and raspy. "Do you know where he is?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I'm his sister. I haven't seen Miles in 3 weeks," she said. "But his wife comes by. That pretty blonde one. Tessa." My stomach dropped. Tessa was Brielle's best friend. "When does she come by?" I asked. "Late," the neighbor whispered. leaning closer. Like 2 or 3 in the morning. She doesn't stay. She just takes things. Boxes. Electronics. Last time, she looked like she was cleaning the place out. I leaned back against the brick wall of the hallway. It wasn't just me. Wade and Brielle hadn't just targeted my accounts. They were coordinating with Tessa to dismantle the entire Mercer family. They were farming us. They were liquidating our lives asset by asset while we were distracted by their manufactured dramas. I needed an ally. Someone who knew the history of the Halston money and, more importantly, knew where the bodies were buried. There was only one person Wade feared, and she was currently lying in a recovery suite at the Golden Horizon Care Center. Hang on. Lenora, I said, turning back toward the elevator. I'm coming to audit the books. The air inside the Golden Horizon Care Center smelled of lavender disinfectant and quiet money. It was the kind of place where wealthy families parked their elders to fade away in 5-star comfort. I walked straight to the reception desk, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble floor. I needed to see Lenora. She was 72 years old and 3 days out of a valve replacement surgery, making her the perfect victim for a predator who knew her schedule. I'm here to see Lenora Halston, I said, reaching for the visitor log. Room 304. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly laminated eyebrows, did not slide the book toward me. Instead, she typed something into her terminal and frowned. I am sorry, Mrs. Mercer, she said, her voice dropping to a practiced whisper, but the visitation list was updated this morning. You have been removed. Removed, I asked, keeping my voice level. By whom? By her medical proxy, she replied. She pulled a photocopy of a document from a folder on her desk and slid it across the counter. Mr. Wade Halston is now the sole designated guardian for all medical and visitation decisions. I looked at the paper. It was a standard medical power of attorney. Wade's signature was a bold, arrogant scrawl at the bottom, but above it, Lenora's signature was wrong. It was weak, trailing off the line, the letters jagged and disconnected. It looked less like a signature and more like a cry for help. Look at the timestamp, I said, pointing to the notary seal. Dated yesterday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't see the problem, the receptionist said defensively. At 2 o'clock yesterday, Lenora was in post-op recovery, I said, locking eyes with her. She was on a heavy drip of sedatives. Legally, she lacked the capacity to consent to a lunch order, let alone sign away her autonomy. I leaned over the counter, lowering my voice so the security guard wouldn't hear, making it a conspiracy between the two of us. If this facility enforces a document signed under undue influence and medical incapacitation, you become liable for elder abuse facilitation. When I file the report with the state board, do you want your name listed as the person who blocked the family from verifying the patient's safety? The receptionist's color drained away. She looked at the guard, then back at me. 10 minutes, she hissed, and the door stays open. I will have a nurse stand outside. I didn't say thank you. I just walked. Room 304 was dim. Lenora looked small in the hospital bed, her skin gray against the white sheets. But when I stepped into her line of sight, her eyes snapped open. There was fear there, but the moment she recognized me, it shifted to relief. Calla, she breathed, the oxygen tube hissing softly. You came. I'm here. Lenora, I said, taking her cold hand. Did Wade make you sign that paper? She nodded weakly, her grip tightening on my fingers with surprising strength. He brought her. The girl, Brielle. Her voice trembled with anger. They told me. They said you were stealing from the accounts. They said you used your job at the bank to liquidate the portfolio. Wade said he needed the signature to protect the money from you. My chest tightened. It was a mirror projection. Wade was accusing me of the exact crime he was committing. It's a lie. Lenora, I said firmly. I am going to fix it, but I need to know where the records are. The real ones. Lenora glanced at the door where the nurse was checking a chart. Then she reached under her pillow. She pressed a small, cold brass key into my palm. "Rowan Storage," she whispered, the words rushing out. "Unit 18. It's under my maiden name. Hartley, go. Before he finds out." "I've got it," I said, closing my fist around the key. "Rest now." "I will come back for you." I walked out of the room exactly 9 minutes after I entered. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face was stone. I turned the corner toward the elevators and nearly collided with a wall of white roses. Tessa stood there, Miles's wife. She was holding a bouquet of lilies that looked like they belonged at a funeral. She was wearing a pastel sundress and a look of manufactured concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Calla," Tessa said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I didn't expect to see you here. Wade said you were having an episode." "Cut the act." "Tessa," I said, stepping around her. "I know about the boxes at Miles's apartment. I know you're helping them strip the assets." Tessa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went dead. She stepped into my path, blocking the elevator button. The sweet, cloying scent of the lilies was suffocating. "You look tired." "Calla," she said, tilting her head. "Paranoid. You know. Wade is very worried about your mental state. If you keep harassing the family, well, he might have to sign the papers to have you sent away for treatment. Just like he signed for Lenora." She laughed, a light, airy sound that made my skin crawl. "Be careful," she whispered, "or you'll be the next one with a visitation list." I didn't respond. I just pressed the button for the lobby, watching the doors close on her smiling face. I had the key, and now I knew exactly how dirty they were willing to play. Rowan Storage was a fortress of corrugated metal and fluorescent buzzing located in an industrial park 5 miles west of the city. I arrived at 11 o'clock at night, the darkness thick and heavy with humidity. The facility was automated, a ghost town of memories locked away in 10 by 10 steel boxes. I punched the access code Lenora had whispered to me into the keypad and listened to the gate slide open with a mechanical groan. Unit 18 was down a long concrete corridor that smelled of dust and stale air. My hands were steady as I slid the brass key into the padlock. It clicked open. I rolled the metal door up just enough to slip inside and pulled the chain for the single overhead bulb. The room was not filled with old furniture or Christmas decorations. It was an archive. 3 heavy filing cabinets lined the back wall, flanked by bankers' boxes stacked with military precision. This was Lenora's insurance policy. I went straight for the filing cabinet. The drawers were labeled by fiscal year, but one hanging folder stood out because it was thicker than the others. The label read, "Juniper Vale Advisory." I pulled it out and spread the documents on top of a plastic bin. They were invoices, monthly consulting fees for strategic lifestyle management and asset optimization. The amounts were staggering $12,000 here, $15,000 there. But it was the signature at the bottom of the receiving receipts that made my blood run cold. It was a loopy, artistic scrawl that I had seen on birthday cards and thank you notes for years. "Brielle," I whispered, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. She hadn't just been sleeping with him. She had been invoicing him. And he had been paying her with his mother's money. Behind the invoices was a sealed envelope made of heavy cream linen. On the front, in Lenora's elegant cursive, were the words, "For Calla. If you are reading this, Wade has chosen betrayal." I tore it open. The letter was dated 6 months ago. "Calla," the letter began, "I am writing this because I fear my son has lost his way. Wade projects wealth, but it is a house of cards. He is not a millionaire. He is leveraged to the hilt. The funds he claims to manage are depleted. He has been pressuring me to liquidate the family trust to cover his margin calls. I have refused. If I am incapacitated, Know that he will try to take what I would not give. Attached to the letter was a draft of a new trust agreement. It was unexecuted, but the intent was clear. It listed every major asset, including the Highland Park house, and designated them to be placed into an irrevocable trust with an independent trustee. It proved that Wade had no claim to the home he had just kicked me out of. He was trying to steal the house before this document could be signed. I did not steal the files. That would have given his lawyers ammunition to claim I had tampered with the estate. Instead, I became a machine. I pulled out my phone and a portable scanner app. I photographed every invoice, every page of the letter, and every clause of the draft trust. I created a digital mirror of the truth, uploaded it to an encrypted server, and then placed every piece of paper back exactly where I found it. I left the unit at midnight and drove straight to the glass and steel tower of Stanton and Price Fiduciary. I had called their emergency line on the drive over. Noel Price was waiting for me in a conference room on the 40th floor. He was a man who looked like he slept in his suit, sharp-edged and entirely devoid of sympathy. I liked him immediately. He reviewed the digital files I airdropped to his tablet in silence. "You have a problem. Mrs. Mercer," Noel said, sliding the tablet onto the mahogany table. "This draft trust is powerful evidence of intent, but it is not signed. Wade has a signed medical power of attorney. He is currently the legal decision-maker. He coerced her," I said. "He signed it while she was medicated. Proving that takes time," Noel countered, leaning forward. "And time is what you do not have. They will file for permanent guardianship tomorrow morning. Once they have that, they will liquidate the assets to pay for her care. And simultaneously, they will launch a preemptive strike on your credibility. They will paint you as a disgruntled, unstable wife trying to loot the estate, your license, your reputation. They will burn it all to the ground to keep you quiet." I looked at the image of Lenora's letter on the screen. Wade has chosen betrayal. They think they have 48 hours before I can file a motion, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. They think I am looking for a hotel room to cry in. If we wait for the courts to open, we lose. Noel said. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. Then I'll move faster. At 7:45 in the morning, my employee badge failed to open the turnstile at Halloway Private Ledger Bank. The small LED light flashed a harsh, unforgiving red. I tried again. Red. The head of building security stepped out from his booth. He would not look me in the eye. "I am sorry, Mrs. Mercer," he said, keeping his voice low. "Human Resources needs to see you in the ground floor conference room, immediately." I did not argue. I walked into the glass-walled room where the director of compliance and a junior attorney from the general counsel's office were waiting. On the table sat a single sheet of paper. The header read, "Notice of Internal Investigation. We received an anonymous tip through the ethics hotline at 3 o'clock this morning," the compliance director said. Her hands folded on top of a thick file. "The complaint alleges that you have been using your access as a senior underwriter to manipulate the assets of a vulnerable senior citizen for personal gain. Specifically, your mother-in-law, Mrs. Lenora Halston." I sat down, my spine touching the back of the chair. The phrasing was specific. Vulnerable senior citizen. That was not banker terminology. That was litigation terminology. Wade had not just locked me out of the house. He was trying to kill my credibility so that any testimony I gave in court would be dismissed as the desperate ramblings of a disgraced employee. "Let me guess," I said, my voice steady. "The complaint suggests I was coercing her to change her estate planning. It suggests you were manufacturing financial distress to force a power of attorney transfer," the attorney said. "We have to suspend your access pending a full forensic review. This is standard procedure." Calla. I looked at them. They expected me to cry. They expected me to beg for my career. "I don't want a review," I said. "I want an audit. Pull my internal logs for the last 6 months. Every keystroke, every email. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed stack of emails I had saved weeks ago, anticipating that Wade might eventually try to gaslight the family. Lenora emailed me from her personal account on the 4th of last month, I said, sliding the paper across the table. She asked me, as her daughter-in-law, not as a banker, to look at a transaction she didn't recognize. I directed her to her own wealth manager. I never touched the money. The metadata will prove it. The compliance director picked up the paper, her eyes scanning the timestamp. I stood up and unclipped my ID badge. I placed it on the mahogany table next to my corporate laptop. You are going to find that I am clean, I said. But I cannot fight this investigation and a hostile guardianship battle at the same time. I am not waiting for you to suspend me. I am taking a voluntary unpaid leave of absence, effective immediately. I need my schedule clear. I walked out of the building before they could process the resignation of authority. I was now unemployed, but I was also unburdened. I was no longer a banker bound by compliance hours. I was a free agent. My phone buzzed as I stepped onto the pavement. It was a text from Noel Price. He filed the emergency ex parte motion 9 minutes ago. Hearing is set for tomorrow. We are on the clock. I dialed Miles. This time, I didn't leave a voicemail. I texted him a single address Starbucks on 4th and Main, 10 minutes. Or I send the police to check on your solvency. He walked in 12 minutes later. My brother looked 10 years older than he had last week. His shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't hug me. He stood by the table, vibrating with anxiety. Tessa said you lost it, Miles said, his voice cracking. She said you went to the care center and screamed at the nurses. She said you're having a breakdown because of the stress of the new house. Sit down. Miles, I said, I can't. Calla, you need help. Wade is just trying to protect Mom from sit down, I snapped. He dropped into the chair, looking at me with a mixture of fear and pity. Tessa is lying to you, I said softly. She isn't protecting the family. She is helping Wade liquidate it. I placed my iPad on the table between us. I did not say another word. I pressed play on the security footage from the wine room. Miles watched Wade kiss Brielle. He watched Brielle look at the camera and smile. He watched the timestamp. Then, I swiped to the next image. It was the photo of the post office box receipt with Wade's handwriting, followed by the invoice for Juniper Vale Advisory with the signature that matched the birthday cards Tessa sent me every year. And finally, I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a credit card application in Miles's name, approved 3 weeks ago, with an income stated that was triple his actual salary. The contact email was a burner account linked to Wade's IP address. They are using your credit to float their debt. Miles, I said, when the house of cards falls, the debt will be in your name. Tessa isn't scared for me. She's scared that I found the paper trail. Miles stared at the signature on the application. His hand came up to cover his mouth. He looked at the screen, then at me. The color drained from his face, leaving him a pale, trembling mess. She told me she was at yoga, Miles whispered, his voice barely audible. That night, the timestamp on the video. She said she was at yoga. He stared blankly at the fraudulent income declaration on the screen, looking like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. I signed papers like this, Miles whispered, his voice trembling. Last Tuesday, at the airport, right before I flew to the job site, Tessa met me at the terminal. She said it was just a debt restructuring form for the car loan. She said she found a better rate. I closed the iPad cover with a sharp snap that made him flinch. It wasn't a car loan. Miles, I said, keeping my voice low and surgical. It was a liability transfer. Wade and Brielle are draining the liquid cash, but they are piling the debt onto you. If this audit triggers a federal investigation, Wade walks away claiming he was just an advisor. You are the one who signed the documents. You are the fall guy. Miles put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook violently. How could she? He choked out, the words catching in his throat. We were trying for a baby, Calla. She told me she loved me this morning. I reached across the table and grabbed his wrist. I did not offer comfort. I offered traction. Stop it. I commanded. We do not have time to hurt. We have time to prove. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Noel Price. I put him on speaker. I have the schedule. Noel's voice was crisp and devoid of sleep. The court opens at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for the emergency guardianship hearing. Wade's lawyers will be there at 8:30 to file the ex parte motion. We need to beat them to the signature. What is the play? I asked. We need a forensic capacity evaluation, Noel said. An independent psychiatrist needs to interview Lenora before 8 o'clock. If we can get a certified medical opinion stating she is of sound mind, and then have her sign the new trust documents before the judge bangs the gavel, Wade's power of attorney becomes a useless piece of paper, but it has to be watertight. I'll hire Dr. Eris Thorne, I said. He is the gold standard for competency hearings. I'll pay his rush fee. Good, Noel said. I will have the trust documents ready. Do not let Wade know we are moving. The line clicked dead. I looked back at Miles. His phone lit up with a text message. The name on the screen was Tessa. Miles stared at it. She says she needs to see me. She says she found something on Wade's computer that could help us. She says she is scared. Hope flickered in his eyes. It was pathetic, and it was dangerous. He wanted to believe that his wife was a victim. Just like him. Don't, I said. But what if she's telling the truth? Miles asked, his thumb hovering over the reply button. What if Wade is threatening her too? I pulled up one last document on my phone. I had been saving it, hoping I wouldn't have to use it, but Miles needed the kill shot. Look at the date, I said, shoving the phone under his nose. It was an email confirmation for a luxury handbag rental service, charged to the fraudulent credit card in Miles's name. The delivery address was Tessa's sister's house. The date was yesterday. She isn't scared, Miles, I said. She is shopping. She is texting you because Wade knows I am up to something, and they want to know where I am. You are the leak. Miles looked at the receipt. The hope died in his eyes, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He didn't say a word. He tapped the screen 3 times. Block contact. He put the phone down face first on the table. Tell me what to do, Miles said. We need to buy time, I said. I opened my messaging app and typed a text to Wade. I needed him arrogant. I needed him to think he had already won so he wouldn't check the rearview mirror. You win, I typed. I can't fight the bank investigation and you at the same time. I will come by tomorrow evening to get my things. Please don't file the restraining order. I hit send. 30 seconds later. The read receipt flashed. He didn't reply. That meant he bought it. He was likely laughing about it with Brielle right now, toasting to their victory with my champagne. Let's go, I said to Miles. We have work to do. We retreated to my hotel room. It became a command center. I taped a timeline to the mirror using hotel stationery. I mapped out the flow of funds, the timestamps of the surveillance footage, and the medical logs from the care center. I prepared the packet for Dr. Thorne. I was not a wife mourning a marriage. I was a senior underwriter preparing for the most important audit of my career. The sun would rise in 6 hours, and when it did, I intended to catch them all sleeping. The automated doors of the Golden Horizon Care Center slid open at exactly 6:45 in the morning. Miles and I stepped into the lobby, flanking Dr. Thorne like bodyguards. We were 15 minutes early, but we were already late. Sitting in the wingback chair near the reception desk was a man in a charcoal suit. I recognized him immediately. It was Silas Vance, Wade's personal attorney. He had a manila folder resting on his knee, and the moment he saw us, he stood up, blocking the path to the elevators. Mrs. Mercer, Vance said, his voice smooth and practiced. I am afraid you are trespassing. As you know, the emergency guardianship petition was filed with the court electronically at midnight. I have the ex parte motion right here awaiting the judge's signature. He held up the folder like a shield. Miles hesitated, his step faltering, but Noel Price emerged from the shadow of the entryway behind us. "Key word." "Silas," Noel said, stepping between me and Vance, awaiting. "A filed motion is not a signed order until a judge puts ink on that paper. Mrs. Halston retains all her civil liberties, and that includes the right to choose her own medical counsel." Vance's smile tightened. "She is incapacitated. Noel, we have the affidavit. And we have a forensic psychiatrist," Noel countered, gesturing to Dr. Thorne. "Step aside, or I will have you cited for interference with a medical evaluation." Vance didn't move, but before the standoff could escalate, the elevator dinged, the doors opened, and Tessa stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual designer athleisure. She was dressed in a modest floral blouse, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like the picture of a grieving, concerned daughter-in-law. "Calla, please," Tessa pleaded, her eyes wide and wet. "Don't do this. Mom is confused. Wade and I just want her to rest." She turned to the receptionist. "Let them in. Let them see how bad she is. Then maybe they will stop this madness." We crowded into room 304. Lenora was sitting up in bed, looking frail but awake. Tessa rushed to her bedside, grabbing her hand before I could intervene. "Mom," Tessa cooed, her voice dripping with saccharine concern. "It's Tessa. Do you know who these people are? Do you know what year it is?" "It's 1999, isn't it?" It was a trap. She was trying to plant the suggestion of dementia, to trigger a confused response in front of the doctor. Lenora pulled her hand away slowly. She looked at Tessa, then at Dr. Thorne, and finally settled her gaze on the gold bracelet gleaming on Tessa's wrist. "It is Tuesday, October 14th, Lenora said, her voice raspy but razor-sharp. "And that is a Cartier Love bracelet, size 17. It costs $7,400. It was purchased on August 3rd using a wire transfer from the Halston Family Maintenance Fund. I remember because I thought I was paying for my own pacemaker surgery that day." Tessa froze. The color drained from her face as she instinctively covered the bracelet with her other hand. "She is hallucinating," Tessa stammered, backing away. She doesn't know what she's saying. I am certifying Mrs. Halston as fully capacitated," Dr. Thorne said, speaking into his dictaphone. "She is oriented to time, place, and financial reality. Get her out." I said to Miles, "Now." We didn't use the main lobby. We wheeled Lenora out through the service exit, past the laundry carts and the smell of industrial bleach, into the back of Noel's waiting SUV. We drove in silence, the city waking up around us, racing against a judge's signature that could drop at any second. At the offices of Stanton and Price, the conference room was ready. Lenora's hand shook as she held the pen, but her eyes were dry. She signed the revocable trust amendment, stripping Wade of all authority. She signed the appointment of successor trustee, naming me, Calla Mercer, as the sole fiduciary. And finally, she signed the no contest clause, stating that any beneficiary who challenged the trust would be automatically disinherited. "It is done," Noel said, applying the notary seal with a heavy thud. "The property, the accounts, the portfolio, it is all locked down." I let out a breath I had been holding for 24 hours. I reached for the pitcher of water on the table, my hand trembling slightly. Then, my phone rang. It was a priority line from the Private Client Services Division of the bank. I answered on speaker. "Mrs. Mercer, this is the fraud department," the voice on the line said urgently. "We just received a wire transfer request on the primary Halston liquidity account. The amount is $920,000. Destination is an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands." "Stop it," I shouted. "We just signed a new trust. The mandate has changed. We can't stop it based on a verbal order." "Ma'am," the analyst said, "the transfer was initiated 30 seconds ago using biometric authentication." Voice print and facial recognition matched Mr. Wade Halston. The system processed it as a verified owner transaction. I looked at the clock. It was 8:59. Wade wasn't waiting for the court. He knew we were up to something, and he was cashing out. He was stealing nearly $1 million right in front of our eyes, using the seconds before the bank's system updated the new trustee data. "He's doing it," I whispered to Noel. "He's running." "Fax the trust agreement to the wire room," Noel shouted to his paralegal, slamming his hand on the conference table. "We need to override the authorization before the clearinghouse accepts the batch." "A fax is too slow." "Noel," I said, my voice cutting through the panic in the room. "A fax takes 15 minutes to index and route to a human officer. That money will be in the Cayman Islands in 3 minutes. We cannot fight a digital crime with analog paper. We have to trip the risk engine." I turned to Miles. He was staring at the phone like it was a bomb. "Miles, listen to me," I commanded, grabbing his shoulder. "Does Tessa have the silver iPad, the one linked to the family cloud account? I think so," Miles stammered. "She took it from the apartment last week. She said she needed it for recipes." "Why? Because Wade is lazy," I said, my mind racing through the authentication protocols I had helped write. Wade provided the face scan and the voice print for the biometric check, but he didn't type the routing number. "He hates data entry." Tessa typed it. I pulled out my personal cell phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was not the general fraud line. It was the direct desk line of Benji Miller, a senior analyst in the cyber fraud unit who owed me his career after I caught a phishing ring targeting his accounts last year. "Benji, don't speak," I said the moment he picked up. "Just listen. I know I am suspended, but you have an active account takeover in progress on the Halston account, $920,000. The biometrics match the owner, but the keystroke dynamics will not." "Calla?" "I can't," Benji whispered. "Compliance is watching the logs. Do you want to explain to the board why you let $1 million walk out the door when you had a credible tip?" I asked. "Check the device ID and the IP origin." "Now." There was a pause. I could hear the furious clicking of a mechanical keyboard on the other end. "IP address is residential," Benji said, his voice tightening. "Highland Park. Same geolocation as the account address. It looks legitimate." "Calla, it is a domestic spoof," I countered. "Look at the typing cadence. Wade hunts and pecks. The person entering that wire command is a touch typist doing 80 words per minute. It is a hostile takeover using a trusted device. Trigger the anomaly freeze. Do it." The line went silent. In the room, Noel was holding his breath. Miles was pale. The seconds stretched out, agonizing and long. I pictured the digital packets of money hovering in the ether, waiting for the final handshake to vanish forever into an offshore shell company. "Authorized user check initiated," Benji said. "Keystroke pattern mismatch detected. Risk score elevated to critical." I heard a sharp beep on the line. "Transaction flagged," Benji said, the relief audible in his exhale. "The risk engine killed the wire. Funds are frozen pending in-person verification at a branch. I'm locking the account down for fraud review. Evidence preserved." "Thank you, Benji," I said, and hung up. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I turned to Noel. "The money is stuck in the pipe," I said. "Now we cut the head off the snake. Take this fraud flag and the capacity evaluation to the judge. I want a temporary restraining order on Wade's personal assets. He just attempted grand larceny in real time." My phone pinged with a screenshot Benji had sent to my encrypted Signal app. It was the device profile used for the attempted wire. I zoomed in on the hardware serial number. My blood ran cold. "That liar," I whispered. "What is it?" Miles asked. "This device ID," I said, holding up the phone. "It belongs to a MacBook Pro. Specifically, the one Wade told me he sold on eBay 3 years ago because he wanted to switch to a desktop. He didn't sell it. He kept it. He wiped it and kept it in a drawer for 3 years, waiting for the day he needed a clean machine to rob me." I looked at the timestamp on the screen. He has been planning this exit strategy since our second anniversary. I said, he didn't just cheat on me. Miles. He successfully forecasted the end of our marriage and hedged his bets. The Highland Park Country Club was a sanctuary for people who believed rules were things that applied to other tax brackets. The Founders' Gala was the crown jewel of their social calendar. A night where net worth was measured by table placement and charity was used as a tax shelter. Wade loved this room. It was the only place where his delusions of grandeur felt like reality. He was sitting at the center table, holding court. He wore a tuxedo that I knew he hadn't paid for yet. Brielle sat next to him, draped in a gold-sequined gown, playing the part of the victorious new partner. Tessa was on his other side, laughing at a joke I was sure wasn't funny, looking every bit the loyal sister-in-law. They looked like a royal family celebrating a coronation. I walked in through the double mahogany doors. I was not wearing a gown. I was wearing a black, tailored suit, the kind I wore when I had to tell a CEO that his company was insolvent. I wore no jewelry. My hair was pulled back in a severe knot. I did not look like a scorned wife. I looked like an auditor arriving to close the books. Noel Price walked on my left, carrying a thick leather portfolio. Miles walked on my right, his face pale but his jaw set like granite. We moved through the crowd like a cold front. The chatter died down as we passed, replaced by the rustle of silk and the clink of silverware. We stopped at Wade's table. He looked up, his smile freezing halfway across his face. "Calla?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "What the hell are you doing here? I told you Noel didn't let him finish." He dropped a heavy stack of documents onto the pristine white tablecloth. It landed with a dull, heavy thud that echoed in the silence. "Mr. Halston," Noel said, his voice projecting clearly to the surrounding tables. "You have been served. This is a temporary restraining order granting full protection to Lenora Halston. This is a court order freezing all assets held in the family trust. And this." Noel placed a final single sheet on top. "This is the deed transfer. The house you are currently occupying is now the sole property of the Halston Trust, administered by Mrs. Mercer. You are trespassing." Brielle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But it was Tessa who reacted first. She stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. "Get out!" Tessa screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "Security! Get this crazy woman out of here! She's harassing us!" 2 security guards started to move toward us. I didn't flinch. I just raised my hand and pointed a single finger at Tessa's wrist. "Stop," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. The guards hesitated. I looked directly at the head of security, a man I had tipped generously every Christmas for 5 years. "Jerry," I said, "before you escort anyone out, I need you to document a theft in progress." "What are you talking about?" Tessa spat, clutching her wrist. "You're delusional. That is a vintage sapphire bracelet," I said, reciting the details from memory. Item number 402 on the Mercer family insurance rider. It was reported missing from my home 3 days ago. It has a distinct scratch on the underside of the clasp shaped like the letter M. I filed the police report yesterday. Tessa looked down at her wrist. The blood drained from her face. She tried to unclasp it, to hide it, but her hands were shaking too violently. I found it," she stammered. "It was just lying around. That bracelet is valued at $22,000, I said coldly. "That makes this grand larceny. Jerry, please ensure she doesn't leave the premises with the evidence." The room turned. I watched the faces of the social elite shift from curiosity to judgment. They could forgive adultery, but they could not forgive theft. Tessa wasn't a victim anymore. She was a liability. Miles stepped forward then. He looked at Wade, the man he had once considered a brother. "That is my wife," Miles said, his voice loud and clear. "And you?" He pointed a shaking finger at Wade. "You forged my signature on $300,000 of debt instruments. You opened credit cards in my name. I have the IP logs. Wade stood up, knocking over his wine glass. The red liquid stained the tablecloth like blood. This is a misunderstanding, Wade said, looking around at the silent crowd, looking for an ally. They're lying. They're just bitter. But no one was looking at him. They were looking at the papers on the table. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the notification I had been waiting for. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. The forensic report from the cyber fraud unit had just cleared. It's not a misunderstanding, Wade, I said, holding up the phone so he could see the screen. The bank just confirmed the biometric data on the wire transfer you attempted this morning. Your face, your voice, trying to move nearly $1 million out of a trust you no longer control. Wade's arrogance collapsed. He slumped back into his chair, a man whose parachute had just failed to open. That's wire fraud, I said, turning to walk away. Federal wire fraud. And I just forwarded the file to the district attorney. The courtroom was cold, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. Wade's legal team tried to paint a picture of a devoted son trying to save his mother from a predatory daughter-in-law. Silas Vance stood before the judge, adjusting his silk tie, and claimed that I had weaponized my banking experience to confuse an elderly woman and seize control of the estate. He called the new trust invalid. He called Lenora a victim of undue influence. It was a compelling story, but in a court of law, stories die without documentation. Noel Price did not offer a story. He offered data. He walked to the bench and laid out 3 distinct piles of evidence. Your Honor, Noel said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Defense Exhibit A is a forensic capacity evaluation conducted by Dr. Eris Thorne at 7 o'clock yesterday morning, certifying Mrs. Halston was fully lucid. Defense Exhibit B is a 6-month ledger of unauthorized transfers from the family fund to entities controlled by Mr. Halston's mistress. And Defense Exhibit C, he paused for effect, is a bank security log from yesterday morning showing a failed biometric wire attempt of $920,000 initiated by Mr. Halston's retina scan minutes before this hearing was scheduled. The judge flipped through the pages. The silence in the room was heavy. Then, Lenora stood up. She did not need a cane. She did not look at Wade. She looked directly at the judge. I am not confused, Your Honor, Lenora said, her voice shaking with a rage she had suppressed for years. And I am not senile. I am betrayed. I am asking this court to protect me from my own son. Wade started to stand, but Silas pulled him back down. It was over, but we had one more loose end to tie. Miles walked forward and submitted a sworn affidavit. It detailed every credit card application, every forged signature, and every fraudulent loan document Tessa had facilitated. It cut off Wade's escape route. He could not blame his wife or his sister-in-law. He was the architect. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. The judge denied the emergency guardianship with prejudice. He validated the trust. He affirmed my position as the sole trustee. And then he signed the eviction order. Mr. Halston, the judge said, peering over his glasses. You have until 6 o'clock this evening to vacate the premises at 42 Claridge Lane. Law enforcement is authorized to assist if you fail to comply. We walked out of the courtroom into the blinding afternoon sun. My phone rang. It was Wade. I answered, but I did not speak. I simply tapped the record button on my screen. You think you're smart? Calla Wade screamed, his voice distorted by panic and adrenaline. You think you can just take the house, I will burn it down. I swear to God, I will burn every file. I will delete every server. I set up that wire transfer to save us, and you ruined it. I wrote that whistleblower complaint to the bank to get you fired, and you turned it around on me. I will destroy you. Thank you. Wade, I said calmly. My attorney advised me to tell you that this call is being recorded for use in future criminal proceedings. You just confessed to attempted arson, wire fraud, and filing a false report. I hung up at exactly 6 o'clock. I stood on the limestone porch of the Highland Park estate. The roles were perfectly reversed. Wade's luxury sedan was idling in the driveway, the trunk open. He looked at me, his eyes wild, expecting a fight, expecting tears. I didn't give him either. "You gave me 24 hours, I said, looking at the expensive watch on his wrist that I now knew was bought with stolen money. "I am giving you 10 minutes. Take your clothes, leave the furniture, leave the electronics, leave the art. If you are not off this property at 6:10, the officers parked at the curb will arrest you for trespassing." Wade threw 2 bags into the trunk. He looked at the house one last time. Then he looked at me. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps a curse, but he saw the cold, hard resolve in my eyes and stopped. He realized, finally, that he wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at the bank. He got in the car and drove away. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner. I turned back to the heavy oak door. I inserted the new key I had cut that morning. The lock clicked with a satisfying, heavy sound. I was alone in the empty foyer, surrounded by the silence of a house that finally belonged to the truth. I pulled out my phone and attached the audio file of Wade's confession to an email drafted to the district attorney's office. I typed a single line in the body of the email: "The audit is complete." I hit send. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment down below with your city or country so we can connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video. And if you want to support us even more, hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people.